Hey, how you going, random strangers? We're getting back to Fate Zero finally. Last time, if I'm not wrong, the head count was 5. So we had Risei, Kayneth, Soloi, Lancer, and then Tokiomi. All of them gone, just brutally eliminated in the most awful ways. And we will get into the whole Saber versus Kiritsugu debate over the morality of war, which honestly, it's a debate that still makes my head hurt because, as with a lot of their disagreements, they're both right, but also they're both wrong. Kirei finally stabbed Tokiomi in the back and made his relationship with Gilgamesh official. And we also learned that Irisviel is the human, or rather the homunculus vessel of the Grail itself, which was wild. Like, I always knew that her end would be tragic, but I never ever saw that coming. The other thing we should talk about is how Irisviel has partnered with Kiritsugu and loved him this whole time. And yet the triple murder of Lancer, Soloi, and Kayneth was literally the first time she'd ever seen his work up close. And it's kind of like she'd never had to see how the sausage has been made, which raises some really interesting and also some hard questions about the role of ignorance and how it can be used to cover up all manner of sins. Episode 3 opened with Kayneth, who, despite being like relegated to a wheelchair and just generally looking quite pathetic, was still sniffing around for the reward of that extra command seal to get a foothold back in the game. Risei obviously didn't think much of him, and like, fair enough, Kayneth had given over his command seals to Soloi as well, using this dodgy servant sharing agreement. And yet, I think that Risei was way too easily persuaded by Kayneth, and I can only guess that he was desperate to have whatever help he could get from the old mage families to swing the war back into the favor of the church. Surely, it's like his thinking was Kayneth, a respected mage from a very noble lineage, would of course share the church's mission to find and acquire the root. And then when Kayneth sort of like held out his crippled hand to receive the command seal from Risei, I was struck. I was struck by how outwardly he is this broken man, both physically and to some extent mentally too. But he was also at the same time definitely playing up the pity card, sort of feigning humility to cover up his evil intentions and to cover up the fact that he does not, in fact, have any of the noble ideals that Risei assumed defined someone of his standing, and the fact that his main concern has always been to feed his ego and hunger for more power and prestige. I don't know, you'd think the fact that Kayneth cheated on the servant contract would be this giant waving red flag, but Risei seems to have gone through life with these rose-colored glasses on that makes him assume that if someone is born into and bred by a noble mage family, then that automatically makes them, somewhat noble in character. When in reality, having the right pedigree doesn't guarantee that someone is always going to act in the right way. And I think Risei is just one of those characters who saw what he wanted to see. In fact, I think Risei's obliviousness to Kayneth's true character is almost parallel to Tokiomi's obliviousness to Kirei's. And I have a feeling that had Kayneth not gotten to kill Risei first, that Risei would have eventually been offed by Kirei anyway. I feel that Risei would have been doubly blind to the darkness in Kirei's soul, given that he had raised Kirei to be his successor. In fact, both Risei and Tokiomi raised Kirei as like their heir apparent, which makes Kirei's disdain for them both and his eventual betrayal, I guess, extra cruel. Not only did they expect Kirei to have all the qualities of a good mage, but they heaped on him these additional expectations of like being an elite executor in the church and a caretaker of the Torsaka legacy. That mismatch between their expectations and Kirei's true suppressed desires just kind of grew and grew over time until it's like this big balloon that had to pop eventually. So it just made sense that Kirei just snapped this episode, or even if it's not snapped, he kind of got to a point where he felt like it was time to just break free. What happens when you ignore giant, massive red flags? You end up dead. Risei was straight up shot in the back by Kayneth, who wanted to stop all the other masters from gaining additional command seals. But if you dish out treachery, you've got to be prepared to get it served to you in return, right? So whatever arrogant soul resided in Kayneth, he really did also care for Solui, which is something we also learned. And I was surprised. But then I was like, why not? Even the most awful, awful person can have someone that they love. And it was stone cold the way that Kiritsugu, with Maiya's help of course, snuck up on Solui and then just shot off her right arm and turned her hand into basically mincemeat to prevent the command seals from being reused or like potentially transferred. So it was just viciously effective and cold as. I remember when watching this scene of being in shock. It's weird, it's not like I didn't know the level to which Kiritsugu will stoop to get things done, but I also think it's a perfectly human instinct to be like, wow, how could someone do that to another living, breathing human being, even if it is for the greater good? And the fact is, Kiritsugu can and he will do things like this. But the interesting thing also to consider is what needs to happen for someone to get to the point of believing without a doubt in his mind that any means justifies the end of eliminating human conflict for all time. I think Kiritsugu must have personally experienced or seen up close some terrible injustices, which is something that Saber also brought up later. When someone does not flinch at murdering or torturing another human being, usually, unless they're like a confirmed psychopath, but I don't think Kiritsugu is, usually they've gone through some real shit. And that thorn in Kiritsugu's side goes to the core of why he is such a compelling but also a very disturbing character. As for Solui, she was under the influence of Lance's mole, so much so that participating in the Grail War became a means through which to prolong her connection to Lancer. And if Solui had ever gotten to wish on the Grail, she probably would have wished to be with Lancer forever. No surprises, Kayneth was an absolute douchebag towards Lancer. He knew exactly which buttons to push to make Lancer, or I guess the sting of Lancer's failure so much worse, even though if anyone was at fault, it was probably him for roping Solui into this and establishing an illegitimate form of servant contract that wasn't going to be as effective. For a narcissist like Kayneth, nothing is ever his fault. And personally, I can't stand people like him. It's like even if they do the same thing or worse or stuff up or whatever, they still act like the sun still shines out of their asses. Here is like arson with a really sad point about Lance's fate. Lance's death is even more tragic when you think about it. In his past life, he falls in love with a woman betrothed to his master and ends up getting them both killed. Everything he does as a servant is to restore his honor by serving his new master. He doesn't speak up as Kayneth hurls abuse at him. He does everything he's ordered, even if it goes against his preferences. And he follows every part of the knightly code of honor, only for, in a cruel twist of fate, everything to repeat itself. His mole causes Solui to fall in love with him and betray Kayneth, setting up this sequence of events that eventually leads him to getting betrayed and killed at the hands of his own master in the most humiliating way possible. Exactly. The tragedy and the irony of Lance's curse playing out again in this world lies in how it didn't matter that he did everything in his power not to repeat his past mistakes. His mold works involuntarily, and he's fated to inspire a sort of tragic infatuation, which sows discord between the lord that he serves and their lady, which then leads to an honorless death. So I totally agree that out of all the characters in Fate, Lancer rates as one of the most tragic because he stands out as someone for whom there never really was a choice, or at least for whom there was the least amount of room to make a choice. He is just destined forever to be a flytrap for women, even though he doesn't want to be. If we compare Lancer to the other characters, like Ryder and Waver are both chasing their respective dreams and ambitions. You have Kirei and Gilgamesh doing whatever the hell it is that they're doing, just doing what they want, right? And even Kiritsugu and Saber, they are both choosing a certain course of action due to some kind of regret or vendetta, but it's still a very deliberate choice on their part. Another aspect of Lance's helplessness is that nothing he ever could have said to Kayneth would have made a difference. His curse was just a convenient excuse for Kayneth to blame every single failure on him and just be disgustingly contemptuous. I appreciated all of the ironies that are wrapped up in this scene. On top of the irony of Lance's curse, there was the irony in Kayneth mocking Lancer by daring him to use his honor to resist his command seal. And given what happened later, when Kayneth was cornered into commanding Lancer to commit suicide, he wasn't so arrogant anymore about how Lancer can't actually resist. He was devastated and said because that spelled the end of his Grail quest. His mockery really just boomeranged right around and smashed his own face in. There's also the irony of Kayneth, one of the most dishonorable characters in Fate, trashing the honor of one of Fate's most honorable characters, which made it fitting that in the end, Kiritsugu bested Kayneth using the most dishonorable or like humiliating method possible. So with Kayneth's arc, I really felt like a strong you sow what you reap kind of vibe. So Saber rocked up with Irisviel to Kayneth's hideout on Kiritsugu's directions. So Kiritsugu, again, just moving servants around like pieces on a chessboard with no regard to their agency. And honestly, like, why would he? Of course he would keep Saber in the dark about the plan because otherwise she would never have agreed to it. Irisviel wasn't clued into the plan either, which became an interesting point later on after the dust settled, because while she was disturbed by the events that took place, that wasn't enough for her to start confronting Kiritsugu about the morality of his methods. In fact, she, though disturbed, is still okay with it. Whenever these two get together, all they want to do is just finish the honorable fight that they started. That is all that these kids have ever wanted. And this really was the only time that we saw like a flicker of joy in Diarmuid's eyes. This fight was doubly meaningful to him because, unfortunately, his service as a knight, whether for Kayneth or for his previous lord or maybe even in another future life, as we talked about, has always been tainted by his mole. This was that one moment of reprieve where he could get a taste of fighting without any degree of shame tainting it. I audibly sighed, I think, when Saber refused to use her left hand in this fight. But it also made a lot of sense because that is so her. I get it. Winning without restoring the disadvantage that she was at wouldn't have given her the satisfaction of this being a fair fight. And she went so far as to say that the shame of fighting with that hand would be a tactical mistake. Obviously, that was just some fluffy bullshit, in my opinion. Of course, Saber would win hands down if she fought at her full capacity. It was really just some flowery language to express the sentiment that being a knight isn't just about winning. It's also about winning with honor, or more importantly, it's about winning with honor. It's like how you can't literally die of shame, but shame can become such a burden that you can't fully focus or give it your best. Maybe that's the closest to what Saber meant. These two are so cute. I mean, they just got a serious case of battle fever, declaring their names and their stations and sort of fighting with these huge grins on their faces. And that rush of joy that they both felt only served to really starkly highlight just how low Kiritsugu and Kayneth went next and how much they disregarded their servants' desire for an honorable fight. Meanwhile, Kayneth was sitting around just howling his frustration at Lance's self-indulgence when Kiritsugu showed up with a badly injured Soloi and sprung this self-Gias scroll on Kayneth. Basically like a magical contract by which Kiritsugu was bound to never harm Kayneth and Soloi personally, so long as a certain condition was met. And the condition was that Kayneth had to order Lancer to commit suicide, thus ending his quest for the Grail and his chance at securing the pride of his family name. That second part about securing the pride of the Archibald family name was interesting. On the one hand, Kayneth is incredibly arrogant and self-serving. he doesn't hesitate to use underhanded tactics, and he constantly mocks and belittles those that he views as beneath him, like Waver and like Lancer. But he also treasures the Archibald family legacy, and the fact that this decision for him was so heart-wrenching suggests that he entered the Grail War not just for personal gain, even though he's a giant asshole, but also to bring glory and, ironically, honor to his family. He's very much cut from the same cloth as Tokiomi, in that he felt a duty to grow his family's legacy. In the end, Kayneth chose to save Soloi, and I think that was the first real confirmation that Kayneth genuinely cared for her and values her. Before, it was kind of vague as to whether it was kind of just lust or infatuation, or whether he would actually just throw her under the bus as soon as she became a liability. But no, Kayneth sacrificed his only shot at the Grail just to keep her alive. And in a sign of great character writing, I found myself pulling back a little on my hate for Kayneth. You know, he's still a horrible, twisted specimen of a human being, but even with his character, I was able to feel a tiny modicum of sympathy. After being forced to impale himself on his own spear, Lancer understandably was like racked with the anger of 1,000 gods, you know, just berating them all for taking away his one wish of fighting honorably and doing it in such a demeaning way. And ironically, this was the one time Kayneth acted out of selflessness. You know, any other time he would have happily crushed Lancer's dream. But as it happened, this was the one time that wasn't it. In fact, when Lancer was screaming his curses at them, he was still in shock. You know, just clutching tightly onto Soloi, and almost as if he was like, I've lost everything else, but at least I still have her. Interestingly, Lancer directed his curse at everyone present, you know, not just Kayneth. The only person he didn't direct his ire towards was probably Saber. Obviously, Kayneth and Kiritsugu deserved it as mages who would do anything to win, including sacrifice their own servants. But I don't think Irisviel escaped Lancer's rage either. She didn't directly carry out the execution or even knew about it beforehand, but the extent to which she has worked with Kiritsugu and her explicit allowance of him to just do as he pleases, in my view, and in probably just on a general moral compass kind of view, makes her complicit. There is something poetic about a character who's never been able to escape the curse of his mole, cursing everyone else around him with his last dying words. And when Lancer cursed the Grail Wish, it sounded like some strong foreshadowing that maybe set in motion a vengeful curse, you know, and I think we should expect some horrible twist at the end when the wish is made, whoever ends up making it. For example, if Kiritsugu wins, his wish to end the endless cycle of violence might be granted in a way that is not what he had in mind. You know, there are a few disturbing ways I think that the Grail could interpret Kiritsugu's wish and vision of world peace, even if Kiritsugu at the time wasn't concerned at all by the horrible words that Lancer spit out as he died. You know, the Grail could turn everyone into like an obedient, emotionless mass, you know, incapable of violence, but without free will altogether, which sounds like a horrible world to live in, even though there is no conflict. There would be peace, but a perverted kind of peace. Or it could very well go the opposite extreme and wipe out every single human being, given that humans are always the source of conflict. And for someone who dreams of being the savior of the world, or at least professes to be doing everything to save the world, to then become its ultimate destroyer, if that is what the Grail ends up doing, I think would break Kiritsugu even more than he is broken now. I don't know, Lancer's curse just sounded way too prophetic and too vindictive to not come with any consequences, and I just have this bad feeling that it's going to bite us in the butt later. Kayneth and Soloi's end was as brutal as it was sad. Again, I'm not saying that Kayneth isn't a despicable human being, but to be tricked into a false sense of security only to be machine gunned down due to some legal loophole is about a tragic fate you can get for a mage of his caliber. Not only that, but to be crawling along the ground just begging Kiritsugu to end his life would have been excruciatingly humiliating in more ways than one. There would have been like intense regret at underestimating someone like Kiritsugu and just like rage and disbelief that a powerful mage as himself could be stripped of everything by someone he considered utterly unworthy. So I actually empathized with Saber and how sickened she was that this is how things ended. Although unlike her, I also understand why Kiritsugu did it the way that he did. It was too much for Irisviel to witness too, which was fascinating because she was the one who convinced Saber that though their methods differ, she shares with Kiritsugu the same essential vision, to create a more just world. It's kind of like, deep down, he's a good egg who will sometimes do the wrong thing, but always for the right reasons. But Saber just can't trust that characterization anymore. Like, how can she be sure that Kiritsugu isn't just a psychopath using justice as a thin disguise for what is really a sadistic power trip? Was it fair for Saber to question Kiritsugu's motives for the Grail? I think so. Even if Kiritsugu had a rational reason and explanation for dealing with Lancer, Kayneth, and Soloi in that way, the problem is, I think, how butchering people in this premeditated way doesn't seem to faze him one bit. There's this risk of Kiritsugu losing perspective. His desire to help humanity is perversely leading him to lose his own humanity in the process. By habitually treating human lives as disposable, he might become too easily numb to cruelty and to death if he isn't already. From there, it's just a short walk to rationalizing something potentially catastrophic that causes mass human suffering and justifying progressively unethical acts if he thinks it will get him closer to saving the world. Take his argument that all killing is morally equal. Now, if he thinks that taking any human life is already maximally wrong, why would he not commit further atrocities to get to a justified end? This killing is the same, that killing is the same, all killing is the same, and hence you are allowed to, if necessary, to kill. I'm always in this weird space whenever Saber and Kiritsugu clash. Like, I understand why Saber doesn't trust him, but I also understand Kiritsugu. In this situation, he calculated the course of action that had the highest probability of success, and then he executed it. I mean, that's what you want in a cutthroat war, right? Saber's only alternative was to fight Lancer without the use of her left hand, which honestly could have ended either way. She was ready to risk guaranteed victory for the sake of honor, which didn't strike me as being particularly wise either. I'm kind of glad I'm not the only one who feels conflicted, just judging from the comments from last time, from first wave negativity. I really appreciate how balanced Fate Zero is in its showing of deontology versus consequentialism. Side note, as far as I know, consequentialism broadly judges the morality of the outcomes of certain actions, which is Kiritsugu's shtick, while deontology focuses on the morality of the actions themselves, which is what Saber is all about. It really isn't super clear if Saber is more right than Kiritsugu or vice versa. Okay, what are the logical consequences of these two ideologies? Saber seems to be indirectly willing to sacrifice the whole world for her sense of honor. I mean, what else would you call voluntarily fighting one-handed when saving her entire country from destruction is supposedly at stake? It borders on insanity. Kiritsugu, inversely, seems willing to sacrifice the entire world in order to save it, as obviously contradictory as that is. There is nothing he isn't willing to do, no evil he isn't willing to bear if it means saving lives. Both endpoints, if taken to their extreme logical endpoints, become self-defeating. So who is right? It's very hard to say, and IMO, as the show keeps poking and prodding at both of their philosophies, it only becomes less and less clear. Yeah, like, you know, when you put it like that, when you see that they are both willing to sacrifice everything for something, Saber and Kiritsugu are really not that different. We're always saying that Kiritsugu is all about the ends justify the means and Saber is the opposite. But looking at it from that perspective, Saber is also an ends justify the means kind of person, except the end to her is keeping her honor intact. Like, you know, as First Wave Negativity pointed out, like she will sacrifice anything, including risking losing to Lancer and therefore risking saving Britain for her honor. First Wave also wrote like this fascinating paragraph addressing the comparison that I'd made between Kayneth and Lancer's deaths versus Ryunosuke and Caster's deaths, and then linked it back to this similarity between Saber and Kiritsugu. So it is easy to think Fate Zero enjoys cruelly punishing and toying with the good and gives the evil absolution, but I'd argue the causality is backwards. It is not that the universe is uniquely hostile to those with honor and ideals. It's simply uncaring and indifferent. It's just that those who expect anything more than that are uniquely set to suffer in the face of the indifference. From this perspective, both Kiritsugu's cold utilitarianism and Saber's noble sense of honor are no longer that far apart. They are both at their core attempts to carry a burden too great for anyone to change the fundamental nature of the world. That was so great. It's funny, like not funny, I mean just apt, I guess. Like I was reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations the other day, and he writes about exactly what you wrote about, the idea that the universe or nature is going to do what it does without any reference to our opinions. Things will happen and we only have control over how we react, you know, whether we accept it or not, or whether we let ourselves care so much about certain things. And the fact that Saber and Kiritsugu care so much about either honor for Saber or ending war for Kiritsugu, it bonds them together in that they are both fighting this impossible fight. Wasn't it fascinating that Irisviel was like, explain yourself to Saber, not me? It was also telling that Kiritsugu totally sidestepped Saber and just spoke directly to Irisviel. It was such a dismissive snub and showed how little he thinks of Saber, how to him she is just a tool. This was, as we talked about, like the first time Irisviel saw in the flesh how Kiritsugu works. But it's not like she didn't know that that's his style. You could say that, I don't know, I just kept thinking that she is an enabler of sorts. While Irisviel was uncomfortable with Kiritsugu's violence, because, you know, seeing people beg for their lives and die horrifically in front of you is a somewhat confronting experience, an entirely different experience than, say, planning something in the back rooms. She nonetheless enables that violence by rationalizing or ignoring or directly supporting it. She uses the reach of the Ironsburn family to help Kiritsugu out. She has repeatedly vouched for his character and gave him moral cover. And she also passively accepts his the ends justifies the means approach, as long as she never has to directly witness the process herself. As his wife and his closest confidant, or one of his closest confidants, she is probably the one person who could talk Kiritsugu down. But instead of holding him accountable for his actions, she sidesteps that responsibility. And this was made abundantly clear when, instead of demanding that Kiritsugu justify his actions to her, she demanded that he justify them to Saber. So not to her, but to Saber. I think a lot of us in some way would relate to Irisviel's predicament. For me, her complicity reminds me of how a lot of things that we consume in this world, be it electronics or food or clothing or whatever, is made in ways that if we saw it up close and personal, we would be horrified by. And yet we still use these consumer goods because we often need them in our everyday lives. You only have to lift the lid a little on, for example, fashion brands who use sweatshops or meat production facilities that process animals cruelly, or of any other number of industries to get that sinking feeling that we keep ourselves wrapped in ignorance simply because to know the truth about everything and every single product that we use would be just so overwhelming. So in no way do I feel like I can moralize about Irisviel's complicity in Kiritsugu's violence, because she is emblematic of where I am in terms of like my part in the global economic food chain, you know, and it's a strange association, but it clicked in my head in a way that made sense. Kiritsugu straight up refused to explain himself to Saber. He just doesn't think he owes an explanation to someone who also kills but thinks that they do it honorably, when he doesn't believe there is such a thing as killing honorably. To him, the chivalric code falsely legitimizes some violence as being more noble than others, and the idea that there is such a thing as honorable fighting for him masks the inherent immorality of killing and makes people more willing to die for meaningless causes like glory or nationalism or justice. All of these airy-fairy terms, of course, are defined by the very leaders ordering people to their deaths. Saber is right too, though, and here I go like ping-ponging between the two of them again. War and violence are sometimes necessary, for example, to stop certain evils from spreading, like when they stopped Kasa and Ryunosuke from swallowing up the townspeople. So if war is going to happen one way or another, because that's just what humans do, then at the very least, it can and must be carried out with humanitarian rules that attempt to limit its greatest horrors. Otherwise, every war, as Saber said, would bring about hell, you know, either total annihilation or, if not to that extreme, total war where it's okay to do whatever is necessary to win, including massacring civilians. The dispute between Saber and Kiritsugu is like as old as time. It's the argument over just war theory. So according to that theory, for a war to be just, or in Saber's word, honorable, certain criteria have to be met. You have to have just cause. It has to be a last resort. It has to be declared by the proper authorities, and it has to have a reasonable chance of success. And importantly, especially in relation to how Kiritsugu does things, the means used has to be proportional to the end. There are also rules of conduct as part of this whole theory of just war, including rules for how to treat like enemy combatants so that war remains limited and doesn't devolve into absolute hell. On the one hand, it is helpful to have this kind of moral framework because it does set a high bar for justifying the use of force. You know, it lays out a supposedly rational process for deliberating morally on war, rather than war just being carried out based on whims or emotions or any one person's judgment as to what is right and what is wrong. On the other hand, just war theory has been rightly criticized throughout history for being impossible to apply in any sort of uniform way. Broad criteria like, you know, just cause or proportionality can be easily manipulated by leaders to serve their own interests or to serve very narrow national interests or other selfish reasons. And throughout history, it's borne out that the appeals that leaders make to gain people's support for war have always been couched in these overtly moral terms, whether or not that was actually the case. Every war ever fought in history has always been fought for just reasons. War is morally complicated, especially larger scale fights where collateral damage is generally considered just par for the course. And that's why some people believe, including Kiritsugu, that morality simply does not exist in warfare. He would totally shit all over just war theory. For him, there is no dividing line that makes certain wars noble and other wars hell. You know, every war is a living hell. And there is good reason to agree with him too. Victory always comes at the expense of the losing side. And that's why we have the related saying, history is written by the victors. War only ever takes on positive qualities like being hopeful or being just when remembered and coloured by the biases of the winning side. Kiritsugu would rather just state plainly what war is: a bloody struggle for survival with each side aiming to overpower the other and eliminate the other. It's nothing more and nothing less. To pretend that it's anything else, and particularly to mythologize it, is dishonest, and it also perpetuates conflict because it causes people to believe the illusion that honor and glory can be gained through violence when really there is nothing there for anyone to gain. I kept thinking about the example of World War II. Very few historians question the ultimate justness of World War II, particularly from the Allies' side. And yet there are certain things that just might tip you over to Kiritsugu's view that even that war lacked any sort of noble rationale. There was the firebombing of several big cities that targeted civilians, including Dresden. There's that huge controversy that's still ongoing today about the dropping of atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's the extensive war crimes committed by the Soviets, who were a key ally and had to be placated, and also evidence to suggest that the Allies were predominantly motivated not by the desire to defeat tyranny, which is the honorable reason, but to protect their colonial and their global economic interests. The danger of romanticizing war, I guess the point is that it allows nations to craft narratives that frame their cause as unequivocally just and right, and noble, which acts to blur moral nuance and then oversimplifies very complex political and historical events. For example, during and even after World War II, there wasn't a unified consensus on why it was fought or even whether it should have been fought at all. But as time went by and as the events of the war slowly were, in a way, retconned, it became the consensus that World War II was this idealistic war fought by the Allies to defeat the spread of tyranny, when in reality the reasons were a lot more murkier and a lot more complicated than that. It is far less sexier to say that World War II was fought for reasons of very narrow self-interest, also on days like Remembrance Day or whatever it is that you call it in your country. When we have our military marches and our 2 minutes of silence, we instead extol the noble sacrifices of the armed forces and of civilians, and we celebrate how they all fought for freedom and to defend the world from great evil. We kind of mythologize war service and enshrine it in our popular or our cultural imagination so that it takes on this sort of revered shine that's quite removed from the reality and the actual brutality of war. I'm always fascinated to watch debates between people on the one hand who are all about respecting the military and remembering that they died honorably, and then the other side who point out that, well, not all the wars that have been fought were on the up and up, or that claiming there is any honor in war is just a convenient cover for dishonest leaders. Because just like this disagreement with Saber and Kiritsugu, they are both right. Some soldiers do fight for honorable reasons and make these incredible sacrifices. And also, some leaders do exploit and glorify war for self-interest. And, we're not here to debate the full laundry list of things that cast doubt on whether World War II was a just war or not, because we'd be here for the next 100 years. There are also a lot of things I think you could point to support the argument that World War II was necessary and was just. And to show that Kiritsugu's stance of all war is equally bad, though reasonable in one sense, also lacks nuance in another sense. And that is that while no war is ever perfectly morally pure in its intent, distinctions do arise when you consider war's many possible objectives. For example, fighting to defend innocents from slaughter carries a moral weight or a rightness to it that is distinct from war that is waged to aggressively acquire territory or to commit genocide. Also, while killing should never be glorified, establishing rules of conduct that go some way to safeguarding basic rights during conflict is morally preferable to unconstrained violence. It is ironic that Kiritsugu criticizes Saber for romanticizing war and trying to impose rules that contain war, when his own dream of permanently ending conflict is equally unrealistic and equally romanticized, and also seems a bit divorced from the reality of human nature. And maybe it's just my personal cynic talking, but given certain conditions, humans almost always, not always, but almost always tilt towards violence and conflict. So Saber actually appears to be the one with the more realistic view, if you can believe it or not. You know, conflict has and always will be part of life as long as humans exist. One has to accept that and then do your best to try and contain its worst excesses. Here is another perspective from Ragashingo showing again why there are valid points on both sides. Kiritsugu can only justify his actions as being in the right because he believes he is a final martyr who has one chance to end all mankind's suffering thanks to the Holy Grail. Without that magical wish-granting trump card and the promise of it all having been worth it, there is no way Kiritsugu would engage in this kind of total bloody warfare. Of course, Saber is also right, just in a more practical manner. As someone who did not have this luxury of a magical get-out-of-jail-free card, she used rules in order to at least bend the horrors of war towards the greater good. Who is right, Kiritsugu or Turia? Both and neither, of course. Each has valid points. Yeah, I always kept coming back to that same conclusion. It is tempting to choose Saber because she only kills for the greater good, but Kiritsugu is really the same. He isn't killing for the sake of evil. The greater good is kind of eliminated as a factor. So while I do choose Saber because I like her ideals better, my choice really comes down to not having a holy grail that can permanently save the world. If such a thing really existed, then maybe Kiritsugu is the better choice. The fact that the existence of the Grail changes the calculation somewhat was a great point, even if I am still a bit wary of exactly how the Grail is going to implement such a wish. But you pinpointed why I feel Kiritsugu and Saber's stances aren't that diametrically opposed. In another life, I really feel like they could have balanced out each other's perspectives if they both weren't so stubborn. You know, both express legitimate ethical truths. And that is not the cop-out answer that it sounds like. Saber recognizes that violence is sometimes necessary, but tries to limit its horrors. Kiritsugu will use any means to decisively end conflict, but he also doesn't completely abandon moral considerations either, like when he evacuated the building Kayneth was in before he blew it up. I also think that they're both emphasizing very different aspects of an issue that is notoriously complex and touches on multiple essentially contested concepts, namely the ethics of war and what constitutes justice. We all hope that moral codes can impose some sort of order on the inherent madness of war, and sometimes they do, but maybe ultimately some messes can never be untangled or made sense of, and that's just the essential messiness of war. Kiritsugu denied that he orchestrated the triple murder in this way so that he could teach Saber a lesson about how wrong she is, that killing can be anything but dirty and brutal. Now, do we believe him? I believed him when he said that this was the best way to ensure that there were no loose ends, but also I can't help but feel like he did enjoy the opportunity to rub that lesson into Saber's face. For some reason, Kiritsugu has a chip on his shoulder against those who believe there can be honor in war, and I think Saber was right when she guessed that he is so hell-bent on doing whatever it takes because he wants, or still does, cling to justice as the ultimate goal more than most people do. Maybe baby Kiritsugu believed in someone who preached justice and who preached fighting honorably to achieve justice, but was very bitterly disappointed when playing by the rules repeatedly failed to produce the desired results, teaching him that ideals and ethics are useless fantasies that cannot change the world. Or maybe the hero he believed in was himself, but he found he had to make increasingly morally compromising choices to get things done. Maybe he is so bitter because he failed to live up to his own ideal of a hero. It seems like Saber hit a nerve, which probably means that she was right about why he's so salty. Kiritsugu reminds us that some very passionately held principles, when tested repeatedly by harsh realities, can curdle into like a zealous cynicism, kind of like bad milk. It's like his idealism was poisoned. He still clings to a version of his dream for a better world, but his disillusionment now means that no cost is too high if he can get it done. We have pinned Kiritsugu as an anti-hero for a while now. You know, someone who does morally questionable things with good intentions. The question is, will he be an anti-hero that we sympathize with? Part of why we more often identify with anti-heroes as opposed to lawful good ones is that we ourselves aren't perfect. Anti-heroes, they contain multitudes. You know, their motives are complicated, just like we ourselves are complicated. And so we find them more relatable. If we ever get to see that pivotal moment in Kiritsugu's life, I wonder how compelling it's going to be. If we will get to see the difficulties and the pressure that he experienced and say, yep, I understand why he became who he is now. I don't approve of it, but I get it. And I'm actually kind of rooting for him as well. A lot will ride on, I think, what it was exactly that twisted him into who he is today. This is the first time, I think, that we have heard from Kiritsugu himself, from his own mouth, state exactly what it is that he wants. He wants to save the world by ending the cycle of violence, even if it means he has to bear all of the world's evil. Those words, bearing all the world's evil, reveal this monumental savior complex. It's like he believes only he has the strength of will to sacrifice anything and anyone necessary to get what needs to be done. He sees himself almost as this Christ-like figure who will single-handedly deliver humanity from evil. Because he has such an inflated view of his own role in ending conflict, Kiritsugu, I think, paradoxically shows little faith in humanity's own potential to save themselves. But then, if that's the case, then why is he bothering to save people he doesn't think can ever be trusted to do the right thing? If indeed a certain significant proportion of humans will tend to choose violence and conflict, then logically the only way to really end violence forever is to end humans forever. At least that's what I think. And that is why before, when Lancer cursed whoever was going to wish on the Grail, I was like, oh crap. It's like the annihilation of the entire human race actually on the cards if Kiritsugu wins. Saber also made a fair argument that ruthless methods can fuel resentment and perpetuate cycles of violence because it stokes the desire for retaliation. Her view is that restraint limits endless waves of vengeance. At the same time, I think, honestly, Kiritsugu already knows that. What Saber misses is that even war that is waged for just reasons or waged with constrained violence will still be seen as evil by the losing side. So in his view, it is better to end conflict as quickly and decisively as possible, even if that means acting dishonorably to prevent prolonged bloodshed. Moreover, Saber's chivalric code that governs like duels between knights, I think has little bearing on the realities of war that is waged on a region-wide or a nation-wide scale. So I find myself at an impasse. You know, maybe some of you out there found it easier to take a side. I see quite equally balanced strengths and weaknesses on both. And I think that dealing with questions of war and morality will inevitably induce just this massive migraine because it's always such a messy shitburger with so many ends that can't really be neatly tied up. Immediately after this confrontation, Irisviel collapsed, and it was revealed later that the reason why she has been becoming weaker and weaker is because she is the Grail in human form, or rather she is like the homunculus shell for the Grail. It's kind of confusing because the Grail itself is a kind of vessel, so I suppose Irisviel is like a vessel for another vessel. All this time, we've only known Irisviel's purpose of creation was to do something in the war. Her creator, Old Archt, whoever they are, somehow gave the vessel housing the Grail self-preservation instincts, converting it into this walking, talking personality-filled, human-like thing called Irisviel. And I was like, what? Just credit to Maiya for not immediately driving off the road out of shock, because I totally would have. I have so many questions, one of the bigger ones being, how did Kiritsugu manage to hook up with the Grail vessel? Irisviel seemed to suggest that Kiritsugu knows that she is a literal personification of the vessel housing the Grail, which is why he gave her Excalibur's scabbard to delay the effects of her returning to her original lifeless form. Was Kiritsugu assigned her protector? I would have thought that his participation as one of the masters in the war wouldn't allow that because of, you would think, this huge conflict of interest that would arise. Or maybe it really doesn't matter because at the end of the day, he still has to eliminate the other masters and servants in order to win it or win her. Also, is Irisviel really an Ironsburn, or was she placed with the Ironsburn family to cover up her true identity? Or did Kiritsugu weasel his way into the Ironsburns and her life and propose a partnership with them after finding out who she really was in order to place himself in the most advantageous position? And if that's the case, it kind of casts an unpleasant, self-serving shadow over what appears to have been genuine effort on Kiritsugu's part to give Irisviel a normal life, including giving her a child and introducing her to all the pleasures that humans can experience. And if you want it to be really cynical about it, maybe it's just one more utilitarian thing that Kiritsugu did to ensure that the Grail stayed under his watch. You know, make the vessel fall in love with you so that it wants to help you and therefore gain a huge advantage over the other masters. And I keep saying it. I don't really want to because it's Irisviel and I love Irisviel. But yeah, my mind is still being blown that she is actually just the vessel for the Grail. On the other hand, the only time Kiritsugu wavered in his resolve to win the war was when he had that conversation with Irisviel on top of the castle and desperately wanted to just run away with her. I can't help but feel that he does love Irisviel in his own way, and at least a part of him is sad or regretful knowing that she will disappear once the job is done. Like a lot of other things about Kiritsugu, why not both? You know, he's very complex. Maybe he does genuinely love Irisviel, but also knew that keeping her by his side was a strategic, tactical advantage. The significance of Irisviel confiding in Maiya, of all people, was that Irisviel could trust Maiya would just take it in stride and not pity her. And I totally get that need for affirmation, because imagine you had this big secret about yourself that you've kept from everyone for some time, but the time has come for you to share it, either because it's going to come out anyway, or you just feel the need to share this burden of the secret. And what you want is for the other person to sympathize, but not suddenly see you or treat you any differently than before. An analogy are like the stories you hear of people with cancer. When they tell their friends or family the news, it's unbearable when they're suddenly treated like they're really fragile glass. When you pity someone, it's almost like you don't give them the respect you did when you didn't have a reason to pity them. You mean well, but it's just signaling that you think that all they are is this weakness of theirs, or like a helpless victim of fate who needs saving. But Maiya was great. She didn't give off any pity, only a solemn promise to protect Irisviel and to help Kiritsugu win the war and achieve his dream. I find this three-way relationship dynamic between Kiritsugu, Maiya, and Irisviel so fascinating. Kiritsugu is clearly romantically involved with the both of them, Irisviel as his wife and then Maiya as his partner in crime. Both are his confidants in different ways, and I don't know if he compartmentalizes his feelings, like Irisviel satisfies his need for emotional connection, while Maiya is more there as a companion to support him while he carries out the dirtier side of his work that he shields Irisviel from. But despite this arrangement, Irisviel and Maiya managed to still develop a bond of trust and care for one another. Maybe it's their mutual devotion to Kiritsugu that unites them in a greater purpose, and so does their acceptance, I guess, of the complexity of his moral code. I think they're also bound by a wish to see Kiritsugu achieve his dream after having lived what seems like a lifetime of just pain and disappointment. Now, we still don't know what he went through in the past, but whatever it is made both Irisviel and Maiya want to support him in their own ways. And the more I think about it, the more I appreciate that Fate was able to portray this sort of stable, if unconventional, open relationship. Maiya, her stoicism and her devotion makes her kind of unperturbed by this sort of unusual arrangement, while Irisviel's grace allows her to connect with Maiya without any like envy or pettiness. It's actually really, really cool. You don't really see that often in a TV series. There was a weird moment when Maiya asked if Kiritsugu knows about Irisviel's identity as the Grail Vessel, and Irisviel answered with, "Keep this from Saber," because like she needs to focus, and the answer didn't really seem to match the question. If I had to speculate, Irisviel knows Saber so well now that she is much more concerned with how Saber would respond. She knows already that Kiritsugu will stay the course no matter what. Even if he does love Irisviel, he will sacrifice anything, including her, to reach his goal. And they've probably also already talked about this multiple times, and it's clear that they both want the same thing. Saber, however, there is really no telling what she would do if she knew that winning the Grail War would mean sacrificing Irisviel. She has been known to throw away like a sure path to victory because it wouldn't be the right or the honorable thing to do. And maybe Irisviel doesn't want to tell Saber the truth just yet to prevent that risk. There's also the fact that Sabari is an official item now, and Irisviel probably just wants to delay telling Saber that their days together are numbered so that they can enjoy these last few days as a couple without that horrible fate just hanging over them. Kirei. He was genuinely shook that he's even considering betraying Tokiomi and his father to go and, find himself. But that trepidation was counterbalanced by the high that he gets of walking his own path and just finally doing something that might give him the answers he has craved his whole life about his life's purpose and his meaning. When Kirei found Risei dead in the church, I honestly think that he was trying to contain a smile when they zoomed in on his mouth. It had that similar vibe to the close-up of his smile when he was just about to go stab Tokiomi, even if they didn't show it this time round. And why wouldn't he be happy that his father is gone? He has one less person to answer to now, one less roadblock to have to deal with. There were hints that Kirei hated Risei as much as he did Tokiomi. And as we mentioned before, it was probably because they both just assumed that he would become this powerful mage serving the church and the cause of the root wholeheartedly, when that was really the last thing that he wanted to do. It was completely at odds with his total lack of conscience and empathy, and he just kind of went along with their whims, but only because he had no other driving force or never felt that he could ever unearth that part of himself that is just raring to experience the pleasure of making other people's lives hell. Both Tokiomi and Risei were just wily old schemers, rigging the game to take every advantage for themselves, but both were also constrained by this binary and very rigid worldview of the only thing worth devoting life to is the preservation of high mage culture. They assumed that those around them would share that devotion, which then blinded them to the treachery that was closest to them. Risei didn't see Kayneth coming, nor did he and Tokiomi see Kirei's dissatisfaction with his lot in life. I found the scene where Tokiomi was saying his last words to Rin fascinating because Kirei was actually there watching the entire interaction. Was he somehow judging Tokiomi in that moment? Just thinking, oh, here's Tokiomi doing exactly what my father did to me, planting this idea that my life from birth has been dedicated to the root and to carrying on the work of those who came before me, not really giving me a choice in the matter and never treating me like my own person with my own desires. Maybe this was one more thing that pushed the needle closer to Kirei finally making the decision to stab Tokiomi in the back. From Tokiomi's perspective, yes, he was pushing the family legacy onto Rin, but I never doubted his love for her either as a father. In fact, I think in the aftermath of Risei's sudden death, or murder rather, there was an even heavier burden on Tokiomi's heart to just say everything he wanted and needed to say to Rin, because he also knew that there was a good chance he wouldn't come out of this war alive. Tokiomi proposed an alliance with the Irisviels, which Irisviel interpreted as him being more worried about Rider and Berserker than Saber. And I'm not really sure why he'd think that, given that he also witnessed the power of Excalibur. Maybe he'd kind of caught on to Saber's stubbornness and I guess weakness, in the sense that she has all these moral considerations that limit the exercise of her power. I thought he kind of just reached out to the one and only other old mage family left that he respected in order to make an alliance to get rid of, in his own words, the rabble. Anyway, Irisviel reasoned that if they could leverage the alliance to eliminate Kirei, it would be worth it, because if anyone can beat Kiritsugu, it's Kirei. Why does Kirei pose such a unique threat to Kiritsugu? And it's probably a few things. Firstly, Kirei matches and possibly even exceeds Kiritsugu in sheer tactical and combat capabilities. As an executor, Kirei was specifically trained to hunt heretical mages like Kiritsugu, and so he's kind of all familiar with his methods and whatnot. But more critically, Kiritsugu's skills in exploiting others, their motivations and their psychology, like what he did with Kayneth, does not work with Kirei. Kiritsugu's edge is that he can analyze the ideals and the relationships and the biases of his targets to exploit their weaknesses and to get them to do what he wants. But Kirei is this total black box, or like a void, outwardly detached from any sort of devotion to anything besides his very inscrutable, invisible desires and whims. Kirei doesn't even really know what he wants himself yet, so there is nothing for Kiritsugu to exploit and to use as a weapon. They are also philosophical opposites. You know, Kirei is the anti-Kiritsugu in the sense that he feels nothing for any sort of abstract ideal, whereas Kiritsugu is entirely driven by his devotion to this all-encompassing conception of the most abstract thing of all, which is just justice. So that's why this unique threat comes from like multiple fronts, and it makes Kirei Kiritsugu's most feared nemesis. It's really like a high-stakes game of cat and mouse between two very equally cunning and skillful opponents. Okay, so Tokiomi met with Irisviel. He believes that Rider has the best chance of winning, and so in very classic Tokiomi style, he wants to work with the Irisviels to ensure that the Grail doesn't fall into the hands of an upstart nobody like Waver. And it's just about as pompous a reason for eliminating someone as you can get. Instead of an alliance, they agreed to team up temporarily to get rid of certain competitors first. So far, so good, you know. And then came the conditions, which was intelligence sharing, which was expected. And then Irisviel played the you have to dump Kirei card, which took Tokiomi by surprise. Interestingly, but unsurprisingly, Kirei had zero response to this request. I'm honestly kind of surprised that Tokiomi didn't make further inquiries into why Irisviel had it out for Kirei. I wonder if he'd dug deeper, whether he would have uncovered a strange misalignment between his own ambitions for the Grail and Kirei's. Or maybe it's just some kind of a smoking gun, I don't know. But just this unquestioning trust that Tokiomi had for Kirei shut off any possible suspicion and kept him from discerning the strangeness of Irisviel's request, despite him being unaware of any prior interactions between them. Like, I'm pretty sure Kirei's excursion to the Irisviel castle wasn't really part of the plan, and even maybe, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have helped, but maybe a cursory digging into Kirei's motives for doing that and for going there and what he got up to there might have at least cast a little doubt on Kirei's intentions. But then again, probably not, because Kirei is not a dum-dum. You know, anything Tokiomi could have asked him, he would have come up with some reasonable response. So After the meeting with Irisviel, Kirei still hadn't 100% made the choice to take the Grail for himself, even though he was still burning with this need to sate his curiosity about Kiritsugu and also like his own life purpose crisis. So just to recap, Kirei is obsessed with Kiritsugu because 1, his past is a complete mystery. 2, his ruthless pragmatism reminds Kirei of his own darker impulses, and solving the mystery of Kiritsugu has like become tied to Kirei's search for his own purpose. If he can decode Kiritsugu, he can decode himself. And 3, I think he wants to find out how, even though Kiritsugu seemingly acts with the same cruel instincts, how he still has people that love him. The last domino needed to push Kirei over the edge was Archer, again whispering his honeyed words into Kirei's ear. He played on Kirei's lifelong need to discover his purpose, ensuring that he didn't give up on it, even though the process of finding these answers has been long and hard and fruitless up until this point. Kirei recognized that discovering what he truly desires might actually ruin him, which was fascinating. It would confirm what he's probably suspected for a very long time, that he is a sadist or a psychopath who thrives on the suffering of others. Knowing this would force him to undergo this massive, wrenching reevaluation of himself and of his entire life, which would be a very painful process. So in a way, he is right. You know, he does have to destroy the current version of himself or the current idea of himself and grow an entirely new sense of self. Which is why even at this late stage, Kirei had sort of one foot out the exit, just ready to give up on this entire endeavor, but also the other foot on to this path of self-discovery, because it's really hard to give up the potential of finding the truth about yourself. So that's why he had already gone ahead and sniffed out the Ironsburns hideout, but was still torn over whether he would actually cross the Rubicon. What a huge win for Archer when Kirei finally decided to give in to his basest desire. Archer was like pivotal in pushing Kirei over the edge by providing just the right amount of intoxicating validation Kirei needed to see his rebellion through, for better or for worse. Kirei is going into this fight with what I am assuming is a massive advantage because he transferred all of Risei's command seals to himself. And I wondered about the significance of the Bible passage that Risei drew with his own blood, which is John 4:24. The full verse says, "God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." So it's a verse that emphasizes the genuine faith of a true believer, which, as Archer so deftly pointed out in a previous scene, is the opposite of what Kirei is. To Risei, safeguarding the command seals and the role of overseeing the Grail War was a sacred duty. It required like utmost devotion to God's will and by extension the quest for the root. You know, there was no room for personal ambition, supposedly. So for Kirei to seize those symbols of divine duty for his own heretical purpose and probably to pursue his own desire for sadistic entertainment is like this extreme perversion of that duty, where Risei acted out of a genuine, if kind of like a hoity-toity, arrogant sort of piety. Kirei is driven totally by pure self-gratification. What's even more hair-raising is that Kirei likely knew, well, he definitely knew, the sacred meaning behind what his father intended to convey when he wrote that verse onto the ground with his own blood. And yet he was unmoved, absolutely just cold. He's like the ultimate blasphemer, you know, usurping holy authority for his own wicked ends and feeling no compulsion or any guilt about it. So Archer and Kirei started joking about how if Kirei has really decided to go up against Tokiomi, he has just put himself in grave danger because obviously Archer is Tokiomi's sworn servant and has to be there to protect him. So yes, even Kirei has grown a sense of humor, and it's just so fascinating to watch them continue this long-running flirtation with each other. We then learned this key piece of information, which is that this Grail War was designed to open a pathway to the root by sacrificing the souls of all 7 heroic spirits. So despite how much Tokiomi ingratiated and groveled at Archer's feet, at the end of the day, he was still going to use a command seal to get Archer to commit suicide to get at the root. All of his oily words and his tolerance of Archer's dismissiveness and his attempts to maintain a relationship with Archer, which I hadn't really understood the need for until now, makes sense when you realize that Tokiomi was going to discard Archer once he was done with him. Okay, I've got a really interesting comment from Luna Tomazero commenting on Archer's response to this new piece of information. One of my favorite details in this episode is that Gilgamesh, for the first and only time, gives the smallest bit of respect to Tokiomi only upon learning he was planning to betray and kill him. It just says so much about Gil's fundamental values. He is the ultimate hedonist, and I don't think he's like Kirei in the sense that he's distinctly drawn to suffering. He's repulsed by the boring and the ordinary and gripped by all things rare and intriguing. Isn't rare stupidity more valuable than commonplace wisdom, he said of Saber some episodes ago. In short, he likes shiny things and believes himself to be the rightful owner of all of them. And right now, Saber seems to be the shiny thing he is most interested in acquiring. Also, quick note, you do not need to kill all 7 servants to get a wish granted. If you get the Grail, you get a wish. Killing all servants is a ritual to reach the root, which is what the big mage families actually care about, and the true purpose of the Grail War. This is not super relevant in Fate Zero since the Ironsburn and Mator families aren't really being represented by traditional mages and Tokiomi is dead. None of the masters that are still alive care about it. Yeah, first of all, thank you for that clarification. And you're right, this is the first time Archer has ever been impressed at all by Tokiomi. It's like, a treachery to match my own, which is worth, a small nod. I also thought it was really interesting, this distinction that you drew between Archer and Kirei. They are joined by this desire to pursue their gratification, but it is slightly different in that Kirei is drawn to suffering while Archer just doesn't want to be bored. Of course, even though Tokiomi got a slight nod of respect, it still didn't stop Archer from sealing the deal with Kirei. And I think possibly the most momentous aspect of this whole scene was, as I said, just this continued constant flirting between the two of them. It's just fascinating watching their relationship evolve into this more comfortable camaraderie / flirty / I don't know. It's just, it only could happen between these two because of their quite unique outlook on life and what it is that they really truly desire. The saddest thing about this last scene of betrayal was how Tokiomi completely trusted Kirei until the very end. And the betrayal felt worse because it shattered this trust on multiple levels. There was the trust he had in Kirei as his protege. There was the trust between their two families. But most egregious of all, I thought, was the immense trust that Tokiomi must have had to entrust Rin to Kirei. Rin, his beloved daughter and sole heir to the Torsaka legacy. And Kirei just played along with it, this whole charade without a blip in his conscience because he doesn't have one. As soon as you saw the dagger, you just knew. You knew that would be the way that Kirei would kill Tokiomi. The symbolism of it being the culmination of everything Tokiomi had taught him only made it more fun and just more sweet for Kirei to turn around and plunge that dagger into Tokiomi's back. I'm not sure what Kirei's premeditated plan was. Maybe he had another method that he was going to kill Tokiomi, but the fact that he was very spontaneous in the way that he saw the dagger and was like, maybe I'll just use that to kill Tokiomi. The spontaneity there is out of character with Kirei, it seems, because he is always shown as this methodical, very stodgy, very rigid sort of person. But maybe this spontaneity is slowly starting to be released and is his true personality, because he is slowly starting to really lean into this desire of his to cause suffering. There's just a very clear expiry date for this sort of partnership between Archer and Kirei. For now, Kirei needs Archer's like goading to continue pushing boundaries, and he is kind of, cool company. And Archer, meanwhile, enjoys the chaos that Kirei unleashes. But they are both so fickle and so faithless that there is a high chance that they will turn on each other when their interests diverge, whenever that will be. They both probably know that too, and thinks that that's part of the fun also. It's a mindset that I will never empathize with, but it does have its own creepy internal logic. All right, guys, here we go with Fate Zero Season 2, Ep 5 in 3, 2, 1, go. Oh my god. We talked about baby Kerry. We're getting baby Kerry. The fact that his nickname is Kerry is really cute too. Yes. Okay, so he's a bit of a show off. Sister? This is such a totally different vibe from what Fate Zero has been this whole time. The reach of the church, even on this seemingly remote island. Uh, the language of curses has been following Kiritsugu around since he was a kid. Okay, so. So, Risei and Kiritsugu's first crush, probably. Yeah, it took me a while too. This is so weird. Okay, but I love that we're gonna get whatever story turned Kiritsugu into whatever he is now. His dad is a plant guy. Oh no. Oh no. That does not sound like it would be an ethical field of research. Oh no, is his dad like experimenting on Shirley and make her into this immortal being? Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. Don't do it, Kiritsugu. I mean, Kerry. Oh. Okay, so even the church back then with his dad was also like cast them as heretics. It's kind of like fear of the unknown. It's classic. On the other hand, his dad was talking about human experimentation. Hmm. Have we seen that before? That dagger. Seems important. Uh, why would you use that knife for a watermelon? Oh god. Oh my god. uh, oh, here comes the dark part. Hmm. Interesting. His dad was working on some kind of potentially life saving magic, but also it sounds like it could be used for some terrible stuff too. As with any sort of magical power, it's always a double edged sword, isn't it? This episode is so comfy and nice that it's making me really, ironically, uncomfortable. So it was Shirley's fault. Shirley planted the idea in his head that he could save the world. Okay, so I wonder how she dies. How she dies must have had something to do with his absolute determination to carry out her challenge to him to make the world a better place. Oh my god, she's totally gonna die in a horrible way. I did not get a good feeling about his dad. I don't even know why I'm so like, ooh, that's super apprehensive. He punished her for something, going into his stuff. Oh shit. She did it to herself. Is he gonna mercy kill her? Oh no. He doesn't do it. He doesn't do it. Oh no. Okay. It's all making sense now. Oh shit. That's why he's like, sometimes ending it early is better because it can turn so much worse. This is sort of like the first experience of that, right? And then it just went on to inform the rest of his life. It may be you've got to act brutally at the bit. Oh my god. Oh god. Okay, so it's like zombie infestation. They're immortal, but they're zombies. Where's his dad? These the guys killing the zombified people are from the church, right? Like executors. Oof, blue flame. Where are the kids? All the kids on these two. Okay, is this the guy who trained Kitty? This is the guy. That flute music. You'd never think flute is a badass instrument, but when done like this is badass. Oh. Oh, nice. Oh, she does. Ah, they even have. You could just see Kiritsugu mirroring whoever this person is. He grew up to be them. Oh, they're vampires. Mm-hmm. Even if they haven't been. Okay, both of them ruthless. But they don't seem to be part of either. They're like a vigilante. Okay, so a mercenary. Is he gonna sell out his dad? Probably. Because he's remembering what Shirley told him, you know, use your power for good. And his dad is not a good mage. Oh, that's very sad. Anyway. Yep. He's one of those mages. This is why he hates mages. To see everyone else as a tool towards reaching their research goals. He's already sold him out. Oh my, he did it. I thought that, you know, This person was maybe hiding behind the door or something. But... okay. And of course, he's Shirley's knife. Man, this is... it's a similar situation. Externally, it seems like it's the same situation as Kirei stabbing Tokiomi in the back. Well, actually, Kitsugu stabbed him in the front. But it was still a deception, you know. And shot him in the head! Oh shit. No, he did it right to his face. Okay, so the plan was for her to kill him, but he just decided to do it himself. It's such a kid's question, like, are you a good person? Can I trust you to be good? And the answer is never straightforward, because it's like, sometimes you gotta do bad stuff to be good. Ah! A whole episode unraveling Kiritsugu's internal structure. Oh yeah, just to finish the half-finished thought from before. Externally, the situation looks like the same with this sort of betrayal. Kiritsugu shooting his dad, Kirei stabbing Tokiomi in the back. But I found it so interesting that Kiritsugu did it. Like they were facing front on. He was facing his dad front on and just stabs him right there. Even though his dad obviously wasn't expecting it. But it wasn't like a something like a Kirei, right? He didn't pull a Kirei where he waited for Tokiomi to turn and then he walked up and stabbed him from behind. So to me, it just says that it just reflects sort of the internal difference of the murder. To Kirei, he killed Tokiomi because he was just sick of him. He just hated him. He'd bided his time, didn't give Tokiomi any idea that he thought his goals and his, his stuffy, maidy ways was so annoying and he just wanted to get rid of him. Whereas Kiritsugu, he had come to this moral realization and hardened. There was a principle that had hardened in him after seeing what happened with the village people and, of course, with Shirley, that his dad just needed to die because he was a bad mage and he was going to cause further suffering if he wasn't put down right here, right now. So it was essentially a principled murder, whereas with Kirei, it was just, I'm done with you. Bye. I'm so glad that we got this episode, that they spent the time to set up the event. So really it was a single event that was the turning point in Kiritsugu's life, and then whoever, I guess, this person is, this mercenary who picked him up and just took him off the island, he spent however many years training with them and adopted their even their mannerisms is very similar, the way that Kiritsugu is now. Adopted their mannerisms, their fighting style, the way that they're so practical with their work. Yeah. Man, the Shirley situation was really sad. That is what drives his every decision now, I guess. When he tells Saber that sometimes when you make a decision not to be merciful to someone, you may actually be doing the worst decision, because you're prolonging potential conflict or potential bloodshed down the line, and you've just, you know, sentenced more people to their deaths. Because if he had put her down when she was backed up into a cage and she still hadn't turned into one of those dead apostles, maybe the village could have been saved. Maybe it wouldn't have gone up in flames. You know, maybe it wouldn't have gotten the attention of, you know, the Mage Association and the church, who probably killed a lot more people than had actually turned to dead apostles. But, you know, yeah. Fascinating. Okay, I think I'm ready for Ep6. Or not, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Here we go, episode 6 in 3, 2, 1, play. This teen Kiritsugi. What are they doing to him? Just shooting him up with, like, power enhancing drugs. Severing and binding. Oh, wait. We've seen this scene before, no? We've definitely covered Origins before, and how his is some messed up way of... They sever some of whatever is inside him, and then they tie it back together to make it stronger, but it also messes him up. Those are like bone bullets. Yeah, this when he attacked Kayneth, right? Yeah, we covered this when Kayneth was like, "What? Why are they penetrating my shield?" Yep. "66 is an interesting number too. It's like the number of books in the Bible. I don't know if it has any, like, significance, but okay. I will go back and read all those comments about Origin and, like, the binding and severing stuff, because I don't think they'll go into detail in the show. Poor guy, just being hunted. Oh, wow. Okay, we're just jumping back and forth. All right. Was she though? Was it just the money? It's a very dangerous business though, like playing for both sides. They get their target through the fax machine. Oh no. Uh, the same thing with his dad. Like his dad, like, no, no, not yet. And she's kind of doing the same thing, but understandable. They're kind of responsible adults, I guess. They're like, you're a kid. You're not ready to kill people yet. On the other hand, she is training him to be a killer, so and he looks so young there. Nope. Yep. Yes. Oh, yep. Okay. That's his grail wish. That's it. Right there. Oh no. Oh man. Okay, so this is the second piece of the puzzle. First, it was Shirley telling him that you need to use your magic, your power for good. And this is like, she's like, just kill every bad person and you'll be fine. But she didn't really mean it. And then he discovered that there's this thing called the Grail. And he's like, that's the ticket. You know, you can save everyone if you have the Grail. Be familiars. I like the idea that even ruthless killers have paperwork that they have to file. It's so funny. She's obviously not a responsible parent. I mean, she's not even his parent. She's just a caretaker of sorts. But also is trying to be at least a little bit responsible, but kind of failing. Oh. Oh, I thought they were just going to shoot the whole plane down. But okay, I guess it's more quiet assassination. See, even like assassins, you know, they have morals. It's like constrained violence. Well, oh, because they wouldn't pass like Homeland Security. Even majors have to go through annoying airport security. Just calls him kid. Aww. They have a real bond, even though she is introducing him or initiating him into the killing business. And he's fine with working with her because he believes that she only kills bad people, you know, people who hurt other people. Damn, that is a huge gun. Oh, he doesn't have any like magical defenses or anything. This is too easy. Oh shit. One of them got out, or two of them. Oh no. I mean, if, I guess so. Why wouldn't you have a backup plan? She's gonna just explode. Huh. Wait, what is the plan? She has no parachute. So she's gonna somehow explode the plane with all the infected people in it and also escape with the body. So she's just carrying out repairs mid-flight while there's a bunch of infected people eating each other in the back. Then you need to blow the plane in the sky. She's gonna land the plane with a bunch of with 300 infected people. Okay. I guess blow it up once you land. Where is he going though? Because he's not going to the airport. Is he? Ugh. I hate bees. I mean, they're very important to the environment and all that, but. She did try to change his mind. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Again, similar to Kirei in that aspect, in that they were kind of born with it, you know. I mean, maybe he would have done it anyway. What is he? Uh, oh no! Oh, he's gonna. He is going to shoot the plane in the sky before they even land because he's like he can't even risk that. Oh no, no, you're not landing. Wait, because wasn't that like some kind of grenade launcher? I don't know. This conversation is so weird. It's like he's saying his goodbyes and she doesn't even know. And she's like, "Oh man, I've been in this business for too long." Ugh, this is so terrible. Oh my god. Yep. He's got the massive. Oh, oh my god! And you know what? She probably knows, right? She knows that he's gonna do this. Oh no, don't do the montage thing. Oh god. She's gonna oh my god, he is so messed up. Yep. Okay. Just give me a second. I can't. There's two things really sticking out in my mind at the moment. I know there's going to be more when we go back and watch this terrible 2 episodes. I mean, terrible in a tragic sense. I mean, they were great. It just. I feel like I understand Kiritsugu now. Like, it's just peeled back the veil on why he does what he does so well. Okay, but the two things, the fact that she smiled when the plane turned into a giant flame ball and she knew that he'd done it, that he had made the sacrifice, her, to save everyone in New York. And she was probably thinking, you know, I don't know if maybe in her mind it was like a 50-50. You know, Kiritsugu's gonna do that thing he's really good at, even when he was a kid, and make the hard decision to kill someone, even someone that's close to him, in order to save more lives. And I'm gonna die because he's probably somewhere waiting for a giant grenade launcher, which he was. Or she was thinking, you know, or maybe he can't, you know, we can't let go and he is going to let me land this plane and then we'll go from there. It was like a 50-50 maybe. And then when she knew that he'd made his choice, you know, in the last second, just before she died, she was like, he is my son. He's like, he is you know, the whole part where she was talking about how talented he was, that it scared her a little bit even. Because most people take a very long time to get used to making these difficult calls and killing people in the flesh. But she kind of admires that in him, you know, even though she was the one who taught him all this stuff. You can't really teach raw talent like that and the raw ability to have the mental capacity to be a killer. So she was like, yeah, no regrets either, you know. She's already talking about retiring after this and just kind of being his mom. But also she understood his decision because she's been there. Like, I mean, she raised him. Oh, my shit. Sorry. No. Oh my god. And then the second thing that stuck out to me and is just gonna haunt me for the rest of my life probably is when, after he had blown up the plane and he was talking about just justifying it, just verbalizing the justification in his head, reaching back to his first memory of Shirley, whom he didn't kill, and so, you know, everything went to shit there. It's reaching back and being like, look, I did what I had to do. Now, I killed my dad then. That was the right decision. I killed my mom, or my teacher. Now I blew her right out of the sky because it was the right thing. I saved so many lives. Look at how I'm doing what you told me to do, Shirley. I'm doing good. But then after that moment, he completely broke down. He was yelling like, shut up, at himself. Sort of, I took that as meaning he was just telling himself to shut up, you know, telling all these voices, the voice in his head saying that he did the right thing. Yes, he killed the one person that was family to him, that he actually cared and loved. But it was the right thing to do, and it's going to be fine. You know, he was yelling at that voice in his head to shut up, and then he just broke down into tears, telling us that he's not a Kirei. You know, he doesn't not have a conscience or an ability to love and to really feel hurt when he has to make these decisions to sacrifice someone, especially someone that he loves. You know, it tears at him. It literally tears him apart, and yet he still does it. It's so, the magnitude of how messed up he is, and yet he continues to be able to just soldier on and carry out his work with this normally a cool, cold demeanor. That scene where he broke down after he shot the plane out of the sky, that kernel of him that feels things and is absolutely torn up is still there. Like, even now, let's say fast forward to the present, and he's he's doing this Grail War, trying to get the Grail to save the world. He's gonna have to sacrifice Irisviel. He, maybe it's not the same extent of the bond that he had with Natalia, but it's still someone that he has worked with and loved and had a child with. And to do what he needs to do, he's going to have to not intervene when her body just disintegrates, you know? So, I can't. I think I'm done. Let me know what you guys think, I guess. It's so much emotion to process. Oh, what is the term? What am I trying to say? There's so much emotional trauma to process that it's almost unimaginable the extent to which Kiritsugu had to reshape his entire mentality in order to become the person that he is now and to do what he does on a daily basis. Yeah, it's insane. Anyway, thank you guys for just watching me lose my mind. And yeah, we'll have a good chat next time, you know, once I've just sorted out these insane emotions. Yeah, that was wild. But a great 2 episodes. I'm glad we got 2 whole episodes of Kitatsu's backstory. Yeah. Anyway, take care, guys, and I'll see you next time.